Awesome. Good afternoon, everybody, and my West Coasters, good morning. My name is Marvik Fernandez, and welcome to our FACES webinar. We have a jam-packed webinar filled with some interesting information. We'll just jump right into it. Awesome. So my name is Marvik Fernandez, and I am one of our partnership managers here at NetElixir. If I was to describe NetElixir in one sentence, we help retail brands find and acquire new customers online. Our mission here is to help companies succeed online by humanizing every click. We understand for every click that happens on your website, we emphasize the importance and understand that there's a human behind that click. For our team here at NetElixir, this is important for us to understand, which in turn will help us market effectively and responsibly. For those of you that are new to NetElixir, our team scales across 130 team members across 3 global offices. We have several partnerships, one with being a Google Premier partnership, a select partner with Bing, the preferred search marketing partner of UPS, and lastly, our partnership with BrightEdge. Below are a few of our clients that we work with through various verticals, anywhere from food to fashion. Our solutions range across various services as well. Our digital marketing approach helps brands own the search bar and get found across various channels, whether that be through Google, Bing, Facebook, or Yahoo. Our team has understood the importance of these channels. Our solutions range from paid search, organic search, paid social, web analytics and CRO, Amazon ads, and lastly, e-commerce and tech development services. I wanted to highlight our speaker today, Udain Bose. He is our founder and CEO here at NetElixir, and he also founded PartyBingo.com, also known as Party Gaming. So without further ado, I wanted to introduce to you Udain Bose. Now, I know there might be some questions that do pop up at the end. If you could just put those into those chat box, we will go ahead and address those at the end.
Thank you very much, Marvik. Pleasure to sort of do my first webinar of this year. Thanks, Marvik, for the introduction. Anytime I sort of do a research webinar, understandably, I get too excited and too passionate about it, and I think so. My team member sort of knows it. So, we at NetElixir, we essentially built something called a NetElixir Retail Intelligence Lab, which is very clearly focused on researching some of these live consumer data trends to really be able to uncover some of those findings and insights which can be put into action by retailers and retail marketers, thereby helping them to advertise a little more effectively, as well as what we like to sort of say, as Marvik mentioned, more responsibly as well. So when we started with this research project, which was basically end of last year, we really wanted to compare the shopper behavior online, essentially pre-holidays and the holidays for 2018. So effectively a little bit more about the presentation. The first question we really wanted to find an answer to, or try to really uncover an answer to, is do the online consumers shop differently during the holidays versus non-holidays? The second question was, we really wanted to extend it to across 10 categories. And we said, how do these differences manifest? I mean, if they, first of all, assuming that there is a difference, are these differences same across all categories, or do the differences differ among categories as well? And last but not the least, we really wanted to get into a little bit of a prescriptive mode also, by mentioning as to how retailers can really utilize these insights to run their marketing programs so that they are more effective and they are more responsible as well, and not intrusive or interruptive. The basis of this presentation, effectively, as I mentioned, that we collected data sets, almost about 1.5 million unique or individual customer paths to purchase, which were essentially aggregated, analyzed, and compared for 2 30-day periods in 2018. The first one was the classic holiday time period, which was 11/21 till 12/20. And we really wanted to compare that with immediately pre-holiday, which was 10/21 to 11/20. Now, again, I mean, as the holiday season every year we are seeing extends quite a bit. It is not really we are probably still sticking to the classical definition of holidays. So I have a caveat here. I mean, basically, some of the holiday shopping starts as early as beginning of November as well. But just for comparison purposes, we really wanted to stick to that period, which really sort of started with the Thanksgiving Day and went on till the 20th day of the month, which for most online retailers was the last ground shipping or free ground shipping day as such. We wanted to specifically analyze the high value customer behavior, and the reason behind that, we have observed time and again that 60%, 60% of all of a retail business's customers essentially drive or the revenue is driven by 12 to 15% of their high value customers. So 60% of your total website sales, this is across retail categories, is driven by about 12 to 15% of all the customers. So understandably, we really wanted to focus understanding the behavior of these high value customers. The data was captured separately for mobile and desktop. I mean, we were able to identify some very unique differences in terms of consumer behavior when it came to a mobile shopper versus a desktop shopper. And last but not the least, I mean, understandably, when you are aggregating that level or that quantum of data, it's impossible to do that without really having your own technology. So we built a technology called LXR Insights, which essentially has the capability of tracking the individual customer journeys, and really based on close to 22 algorithms, we are able to sort of build high value customer personas based on the different signals within those customer journeys. So LXR Insights was used to aggregate and build those customer personas. Based on this, we were able to just build this presentation as well. When we captured all the data, we classified them into four broad categories. The first one, we wanted to track the purchase latency. The purchase latency essentially is the time between the first website landing and the actual purchase, or the time between the first landing and the actual purchase. Normally, you would expect during the holiday season that latency to be lower or lesser as such, primarily because people tend to commit to a purchase quicker. So that, I think, was the hypothesis, was online holiday shoppers are incentivized to complete the purchase, and hereby the overall latency which we observe is lower. The second one was cart size. So essentially, we tried to understand as to how does the average order value and number of items in the shopping cart changes between holiday and non-holiday. We also wanted to compare the top day parts. We fundamentally tried to answer a simple question as to when do people really start their search process. When they are interested in buying something, is there a particular time in the day when they are more likely to start the search process? And specifically, since we were focusing on the high value customers, this was all pertinent and relevant for the high value customers. The same question was answered even for the actual purchases made, not just the first visit on the website. And last but not the least, we also wanted to segregate and segment and identify the impact of mobile. What percentage of the first time website visitors were really getting driven through mobile devices? What percentage of overall online sales was contributed by mobile devices, etc. So with that in mind, and using the LXR Insights technology, we started building those high value customer personas. For today's presentation, just to sort of simplify, we really wanted to focus on one of these categories that is a part of our research, which is women's apparel. Now, the other categories that we have researched are art supplies, B2B. We did the research for home furnishings. We did the research for promotional products, pet supplies, home improvement, sports, and grocery as well. So effectively, though the presentation today is going to be focused entirely on women's apparel, but I think fundamentally, I think the presentation has quite a few questions which are equally applicable for any other category as well. Also, the research that we have done, and you can download the research netlexit.com/ypaper, is basically we have research done and those stats for each and every category which has been mentioned out here. So coming to women's apparel, we try to sort of just take some stats. Typically, starting with latency, which is the time between the first click or the first landing on the website and the purchase. we saw that pre-holiday actually was 2.24 days, which went up to 2.43 days during the holidays. That was quite interesting because normally you would expect during the holidays the overall latency to be a little lesser, right? So understandably we were trying to figure out as to why essentially did the latency actually go up. The AOV is pretty much in line with what our expectations were, so no surprises there at all. So $67 went up to $85, which is a fairly expected or within the expectations overall increase in average order value. The number of items per order at an increase of 10% was lower than what we had expected, though. The time of first visit had a bit of a surprise element during holidays because, as you can see, and all of these time zones are the Eastern time zones, by the way. So during pre-holiday time, which is the first initial period in October, the time of first landing on the website, when we are sort of reverse engineering the actual purchases and the customer journeys, was 10:01 a.m. So roughly around 10 in the morning. That time of first visit during the holidays very interestingly shifted to 1:46 a.m. Eastern. Now I must say that there is definitely a skew between the mountain time due to the mountain time zone, the Pacific and the central time zones as well. But it was very interesting. I mean, people during holidays apparently start their research process or land on the website fairly late in the day. The fundamental question is it because most of the promotions get changed at that time, which are essentially driving this rather unique and a substantial difference in terms of when people start the search process? The second one that we tracked was the time of purchase. So 10:45 a.m. again, that's pretty much consistent with what we have seen not only during the pre-holiday time, but pretty much rest of the year as well. That shifted a little bit to 11:48. Just pre-lunch session was when the maximum amount of purchases were getting made by the high-value shoppers. Uh, the first visit driven through mobile devices increased from 44% pre-holiday to 48% during holiday season. So almost about half of all the website visitors were essentially driven through a mobile phone. And last but not the least, the mobile purchases went down a little bit from 43% to 41% during holidays. Very interestingly, I was just trying to do some reference checks and go back to the 2016 holidays, where this percentage of mobile purchases was as low as 17%, 17% for certain categories. I think the highest we had at that time was about 26% back in 2016. So understandably, mobile is the future. It probably is the present and the future. Moving on, I think the goal was essentially how exactly can we tie in. So we have these numbers. So what? So what are those search marketing tactics that can really enable us to win such high value customers? We know as to we probably understand a little bit more about high value customer through this customer persona mapping. But what are those search marketing tactics which we can really deploy or activate essentially to win more of these? So from that perspective, I think as we were discussing as to how to really conduct this webinar, we felt that it should be a bunch of questions. The reason we sort of wanted to sort of put those questions out there, because as I mentioned, the example that we have is only for the women's apparel category, but the research has been done for 10 categories, etc., etc. But we really wanted these questions to be applicable for all of you out there, all of you who have a retail business, primarily because it is equally applicable for every retail business. So hence, what I would present over the next 3 or 4 slides is a list of questions. These questions essentially would help you to build a marketing program. I wouldn't say only a search marketing program, but an overall, I would think a retail marketing program or an online customer acquisition program based on these consumer insights. So the first point, I think the first area or the aspect that we really wanted to focus was the first website visit, right? When did the person really first land on the website? And the two data points that we essentially referenced in this case was the time of first visit and what percentage of these first visits were essentially driven by mobile. So the first question from that I would believe that every retail marketer should be asking, what was the referring source? Where did the shopper come from? That again sort of means that you would really need to activate obviously the source tracking, which would be a part of your channel analytics program as such. The second question if it was a search engine, and the reason I sort of mentioned search engine here, because at Netflix we work with over 22 women's apparel retailers, and we saw across the board about 31% of the first visits were driven by Google organic listings. So that was pretty interesting that 31% or one third of all the new visitors which were landing on the site across the 22 retail or women's apparel customers that we work with currently, they are driven through the organic listings. So from that perspective, I think this question became very pertinent that if it is a search engine, what was the search query which really led this high value customer to really come to your website? You can use a report called the search query analysis, which is fairly easily available in your Google Ads platform or even the Bing Ads platform as such to get this information. The third obvious question was, is your website optimized for mobile? Now I have given a link which you can really use just to quickly test your website's mobile speed. But clearly, I mean, your website has to be mobile first. I mean, it probably in certain cases there are certain retailers who have taken a pretty bold step in making it mobile only. So from that perspective, I think the mobile component and how well optimized your website for mobile devices becomes a key question. Moving on, the fourth question, or I would think fourth set of questions, we also did quite some research at the Retail Intelligence Lab to find out how many pages did this high value visitor really visit and how much time did she spend in the entire session as well as per page. The reason we did that, we really wanted to understand if there was a certain browsing sequence or a browsing behavior which could really provide us some insights when aggregated across literally hundreds of thousands of the high value shoppers. If there is a particular sequence of browsing which these high value shoppers probably tend to be following. The second question on the same set was, we also wanted to see if there was any correlation with the time of our first visit and the actual time spent browsing the website. So did it really influence, I mean, as to when the visitor really lands on the website, does it really have any influence how much time she is spending on the website? And of course, that we really wanted to extend to, did that have any influence in terms of what is the likelihood of her making a purchase as well? The last bullet or the last question in this part, what was the entry page and the exit page? Did the high value visitor, were they more likely to come into the website through a particular entry page, and was there a particular exit page which was more prominent as they were exiting the website? And while they were in the session on the website, did she really add any items to the cart? And if the items were added to the cart, we also found out as to what could have been the potential reasons why she abandoned the cart as well, if she abandoned the cart. So net, I think the question which the retail marketer really needs to ask is, how can you really increase the chances of her visiting your website again? Because as we have shared based on the research information that we have aggregated, that it is unlikely that the customer is going to purchase just after one click or one visit. So it normally takes, in this women's apparel category, more than 2.5 days literally to make, or almost like 2.5 days to complete the purchasing process. So there, the goal in the first visit is, how can you really increase the chances of the first time high value visitor to really visit your website again? Moving on to the second set of questions, which was all around purchase latency. So as I mentioned earlier as well, purchase latency is essentially the time gap between the first landing on the website and the actual purchases. And there were two pieces of data that we really wanted to reference. One was the latency number, and the second one was the percentage of mobile purchases. So there are three questions which I would really like to sort of pose in front of you. The first one is, how can you really design a marketing mix to lower latency? We have very clear proof that if you really design the marketing mix in such a way, when I say marketing mix, is how much would you invest in Google, how much would you invest in Bing, how much would you invest in the social media channels, how much would you invest on Amazon? We believe it is possible through a careful marketing mix planning to actually lower the overall latency or the time gap between the first landing and the purchase. Understandably, you would really need to activate some attribution analytics to really sort of find out this information. Talking about attribution analytics, one of the things which obviously is a challenge or continues to be a challenge, and we don't really have the exact number, but we believe that more than 80%, 80% of all the retailers still depend entirely on the last click attribution. Now that becomes a little limiting when you really look at the overall visibility it provides, because by ignoring all the previous clicks prior to the last click, you probably will not be very effectively be able to design your entire marketing mix. The second question on that same, the purchase latency aspect, is how can you tweak the messages to lower latency? Now, there are some substantial amount of studies that has been done by our content department. In fact, we call this initiative the ad lab within Netlixir, where we are constantly doing those A/B tests of those different ad messages and just tracking the time. When we are tracking the time in terms of how long did it take for the person to convert, if you had a particular ad copy or an ad text show up versus another ad text show up. So we call this part the creative testing. Obviously, there are other variables that we track as well. What was the impact on the click-through rates? If the click-through rate was high, was the conversion rate high or low, etc., etc. So I would again very strongly recommend that first of all, really customizing the ad copy per the different channels. Second, customizing the ad copy based on where does the channel really appear in the entire customer journey. And the third is very clearly tabulating or recording each and every number or the result and the outcome based on these tests that you are doing. Because you would really be able to see a massive impact in terms of your overall conversion rate by really sort of tracking this and doing this test in a scientific and a systematic manner. The last question which I have is how can you further simplify the checkout process? Now, we have a pretty robust analytics department within Netlixir, which is constantly doing a lot of tests. And our analytics director came up with a hypothesis. And that was a very interesting hypothesis. He said that I really wish that every retail marketer every month could reduce the entire checkout process time by 2 seconds. I'm sorry, every quarter by 2 seconds. So again, let me repeat this. Every quarter, if you can really consciously have an initiative which reduces the checkout time by just 2 seconds over the previous month, you're talking about at the end of 1 year, almost a 8 to 10 second improvement in the overall checkout time. And that is a massive impact in terms of the overall conversion rate, as well as, in fact, we have found a correlation with the conversion value as well. Now, this process would obviously need you to activate something called CRO or conversion rate optimization. Again, it's a question of doing those constant ongoing live tests and really being able to. But again, the focus is, can you reduce just or shave off just 2 seconds compared to the previous quarter, this quarter, in the entire checkout process? I would highly recommend that you check out this guide for a detailed explanation of why some ads are effective and why most are not. This guide is being has been put up by a gentleman called Nick Kolenda, and there are some very useful and powerful insights on the advertising psychology that I'm pretty sure that all the retail marketers can significantly benefit from. My last set of questions is focused on the orders. When you talk about the orders, we are talking about two specific metrics in our graphic in front. The first is the average order value, and the second one is the number of items per order. Now, this also is a good time for us to take a step back and just sort of really look at what we call the 4 P's of marketing, right? The product, price, promotion, and the place. Now, there is a big opportunity when you do the order analysis to focus on the first P, which is the products, and just see if or review or analyze if the order composition really changed during the holidays. Were people buying or your shoppers buying something different during the holidays compared to the pre-holidays and non-holidays, which would be again the first P of marketing more of the product. The second one is more to do with pricing. We were able to find some very interesting and unique insights when we analyzed what was the per unit price of all the items which were there in the shopping cart. That was probably to an extent related to the order composition as well. But again, understanding as to what is the unit price of each item in the shopping cart. I mean, you can take it further by looking at the unit margin of all the items that are in the shopping cart as well. I think is something that we would recommend as well. The last question, it's actually a set of more of a recommendation in terms of, I think every retailer is trying to see or seek opportunities in a responsible and an effective manner, trying to increase the overall shopping cart size. Right. That's, I think, the goal which I am very sure that each and every retail marketer would essentially be challenged with or tasked with. So from that perspective, some of the things which we have seen time and again that retailers really do. One is called the retail related product upsells. So essentially, if someone is buying shoes, how exactly can you get that shopper to buy socks as well? So similar to that, are there certain what we call the associative property products, wherein if the person buys X, they are more likely to buy Y as well, and just sort of trying to really create that entire merchandising based on that formula. The second is, I mean, who doesn't love free shipping? And free shipping still remains the number one promotional item or the promotional discount which any retail marketer can really offer, right? So by changing your shipping and the discount thresholds, for example, let us say by shifting free shipping threshold from $65 to $75, if you can test what is the overall impact in terms of the reduction in the number of conversions and how many and what is the overall impact in terms of your overall margins as well. So those tests again are very useful. I know I have been very clearly emphasizing the importance of tests, but honestly speaking, being the fanatical bunch that we are, I mean, it's very important for us to constantly keep emphasizing the importance of constant testing, because the overall landscape is changing so quickly. There is absolutely no other way for you to really expect what really worked yesterday would work for me today as well. The last component, and where I'll probably have a couple of things to say as well, is the smart product bundling. So think of it this way: that are you really creating those product bundles in a way which appeals to your customer? Since we have been working with significant number of retailers. In fact, currently we work, as Marvik said, that more than 130 retailers at this point in time. We have so far have been fortunate enough to have an opportunity to work with more than 450 retailers so far. One of the things that we have seen, which some exceptional retailers are able to do to great success, is how do they understand the customer's preferences and create those product bundles accordingly. So I have an article that I would really like to refer all of you to whenever you get time to sort of check out. This is done by CMU, a couple of PhD students, but it will give you a much deeper understanding, a very academic as well as a very practical, number-oriented understanding of how exactly should you be bundling products so as to be able to increase your shopping cart value. So I will just sort of summarize what I presented in the last few slides. So building successful campaigns is not easy, but at NetElixir, we have been able to recognize substantial amount of success by first understanding who the high value customer or the high value shopper is. And as I mentioned, the reason being 12 to 15% of your high value shoppers account for more than 60% of the overall website revenue. So it makes sense to focus on the high value shoppers. By understanding that, and by sort of maybe solving some of the problems which I sort of shared with you, those questions, you'll be able to better design your channel mix. You'll be able to engage in much smarter creative testing. You'll be able to optimize your 4Ps of marketing a lot better. You'll be able to conduct analytics and conversion rate optimization in a much more action-oriented way. Remember that 2-second rule reduction on a quarterly basis. And obviously, you'll try to sort of just really sort of want to have or adopt an approach which really enables you to be mobile first and that much more relevant for your customers as well. At the end of it, I think it's all about effective and responsible advertising, which the high value customer persona and understanding that really helps you to do. Because that is really what is essentially all about when we talk about humanizing every click, because every click is not really a click. It's actually a human being who's taking time, who's spending their precious time trying to sort of click on an ad that you have sort of produced probably in some channel and come to your website, right? I think that's the fundamental of any advertising. And how can you really engage this human being? That's what NetElixir is all about, which is humanizing every click. So I would love to have your questions at the end of it, but let me, for the last couple of slides, I know we have exceeded the time limit a little bit, but pass it on to Marvik. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. do appreciate everyone taking the time. We will get to these questions shortly, before we get to the questions, I encourage everyone to take a look at the site that we have posted up here, netelixir.com/ypaper, and really understand what drives these trends. As Uday mentioned, and we went through the presentation talking about women's apparel, that is currently the one that we have up on the site. But every week we will be adding a new vertical, and once you do sign up on the website, you will receive the notifications once each vertical is launched. Furthermore, while you are answering some of those questions that Udain has asked in this presentation and would like to have some deeper discussions with our team, in solving some of these questions that we've brought forward, please feel free to reach out to us and ask these questions at info@netelixir.com. And lastly, I'd like to cordially invite everybody on this webinar to one of our upcoming events in New York City at Google's headquarters. It will take place on March 26th, and we'll talk about the importance of mobile marketing. You can get a little bit more information at netelixir.com/New York City. And I'll pause there. Pull up questions. I know we did have a few questions come in. So the first question is from a gentleman named Tim. It's addressed to you, Dane. How does voice search apply to your research findings?
That's a complex question, Tim, but thanks for asking. I think the way that we are really looking at voice search, it makes it really difficult to sort of directly answer the question, because the voice search queries, essentially, Google doesn't really report those queries separately. But what we can very clearly see and observe is if you are able to run some separate tests whereby a particular website, or you sort of just have certain set of keywords built around certain contexts which are important for your business, and that can be really sort of activated only through voice search purposes. So by doing those separate tests, you can probably sort of develop a little bit of a correlation in terms of what are those voice search results and what is the overall impact on the website. But again, since Google doesn't really, or when I say Google, I'm talking about Google and Bing as well, they don't really separately report the voice search keywords as of yet. It's very difficult to sort of track back entirely. So that's, I think, but great question, Tim.
Awesome. Thanks, Udain. And I believe those are all the questions that we did have that came in. But again, if there are any questions or concerns that do come up, I urge you to reach out, info@netelixir.com again.